Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to go over the barriers that actually come up or could come up after getting married to an avoidant. So, when I mean married in this particular video, we're talking about married and they're actually more healed, they're more willing to commit, and you guys pretty much have an overall healthy and balanced relationship where you guys feel loved, or at least you both are starting to get that way. So the relationship is progressing very forward, okay? And so y'all are married. So, folks, that doesn't mean that the issues stop. Most marriages will always have barriers here and there, but I wanted to go over some of the barriers that I see when I'm practicing and are continuous issues that come up that are not actually so severe that the marriage is risked or struggling, but more so when we have some couples come in for session or therapy, couples therapy, where they're just wanting to find ways to manage these conversations or how they can manage their different viewpoints while still keeping the marriage relatively intact. There will be some couples that maybe I'm seeing for a couple years and they after all of that work they're feeling fine, but they want more like a maintenance or ways to cope with certain behaviors that are not necessarily detrimental to the marriage. And so we're going to talk about that today. Now, this is not a one size fits all, and this is certainly not a limited list. There are plenty of other aspects that I can get into and will get into in other videos. But today we're just talking about this. Doesn't mean it fits every single avoidant, but I've seen it a lot in my sessions. The first one is actually that many avoidants don't necessarily have as close relationships with their families. Some do, but a lot of them, it's actually not very vulnerable. So they don't have many close relationships with their families. And so they often will not prioritize yours. Okay. So not all avoidants are like this, but many are where they believe they're close to their family or they use their family, not use, but they have it as more of an emotional outlet. Whereas once they actually heal a little bit, they actually realize they're actually not as close to their family as they thought they were. And so you might see that their families, they take a step back from their families. Or sometimes they live far from their families. They might be in another state. And while they're texting on group chat, they actually barely ever are on the phone and only see each other maybe around Christmas, right? And so that's very different where some individuals might see their parents or siblings like once a month, once every 6 months, depending on so many factors. But avoidants don't tend to be that way. They might be, but that means that likely when you guys are married, because they don't prioritize their own family, they often don't prioritize yours either. A lot of avoidant individuals, they prefer a very small and intimate setting. So let's say for Thanksgiving, you might want a larger setting. Maybe you want your family, their family, or for Easter, or maybe you want a little bit more extended family. Christmas even, you might want to see everybody. And that's common, but avoidant individuals, they might not lean in that direction so much, so they might not prioritize your family either. So maybe you really focus on their mom or their dad, or you want to get close to you want to get to know your mother-in-law or father-in-law, and they don't do the same with your family, and that might make you feel like they don't care about you. But it's often just that they don't do that with their own family. And so that's a conflict, a point of conflict in a lot of marriage, and that's something that you guys will have to work towards together. But understanding to not take it personally will definitely benefit. And for the avoidant, what can really benefit is understanding that sometimes you might, just like you do things for your partner that you don't want to do because you love them, sometimes you're going to have to do the same with your new extended family. So you might not want to go to dinner with your father-in-law or go play golf with him, but you might do it to make your wife happy, for example. And so that's usually how I see this type of issue kind of dissolve or not be as prominent or in the forefront, okay? The next one is many avoidants, unfortunately, and I do see this even in the marriage, they use maladaptive strategies to cope with their feelings, such as substance use or gambling or whatever it is, right? Often this decreases pretty significantly once they start opening up, but maybe it's not even to a point of an addiction. Maybe they just do it every now and again. It's not even unhealthy, but maybe a little unhealthy, but it's not to the point where it's such a high risk. Sometimes what some individuals do is they just leave their partner that way, and If it gets too serious, then they intervene or then they bring it up. But if it's not that big of a deal and it's not affecting your marriage, sometimes you just have to be aware that this is something that you just signed up for. Depends on the severity. I'm not saying stay with someone who's they're hurting themselves. I'm saying if they lean in or dabble in these things every now and again, if that's not something you appreciate, you can leave. Or you might not want to get married to somebody if they struggle with this. Not all avoidants do. But it's very important to recognize that some of them might just, they'll learn coping strategies maybe a little bit slower than you do for whatever reason. They're more comfortable with numbing type of strategies. And so jogging or keeping, like, I don't know, jogging or going out with friends, that might be a strategy for a lot of people. It doesn't work the same way with avoidance. Typically, another strategy they might do is like throw themselves in work, or they might over exercise. A lot of them might do something like that. If the strategy is not that difficult, the maladaptive strategy, or it's not that severe, I would say let it balance out on its own and see where it progresses or where it goes. And then from there, bring it up to them. Or you can still bring it up, but just don't highlight it so significantly. Just know that this is something that might come up, okay? And I can't talk about this topic too much on YouTube, which is why I'm kind of dancing around it. But I did want to let you guys know that is an issue that you can run into. The next one is they may struggle with work stress since they tend to overwork. And so you may now experience their moodiness firsthand and their frustrations. Now that you're married and likely living together, you will see how fluctuating avoidance moods truly are. And I'm just being 100% honest. Avoidance, these folks are just moody people. They are. And it's not a bad thing. Sometimes you just got to let them do what they do and they'll be happy again. You can even mention it. Hey, did you have a bad day at work? They might realize, oh, I'm probably a little too frustrated. Let me calm down. But you will probably see, if you get married to your partner and they're working a lot, you will see that there will be days where they're just not in a good mood. Doesn't mean they're mean, but they might be more detached. They're more stressed. Something to keep in mind, okay? The next one, unfortunately, avoidance, many of them, and most of these I'm talking dismissive or fearful, leaning heavily dismissive. But some fearful avoidance in general might have this one I'm about to say, is being very particular with money to the point where it might be a little controlling. Still more common with dismissive avoidance. But the aspect of control can sometimes come up in marriages. And if you feel it's a point where it is too much, where you're literally having to ask, can I spend this amount? You might want to revisit the issue of control in the relationship in of itself. Because avoidant individuals, they feel like money is something they really attach to themselves and their identity, not externally, but internally. And so it can be more severe for that reason. They want to feel like they're in control of their money. And sometimes accidentally they do that to you because now you're their husband or their wife. And so they might do it to you. And it's not because they're trying to control you necessarily, because that's how they treat themselves. A lot of avoidance, they might a lot of them are very specific about money. Like some of them don't even like to budget on like an Excel or an app. They like to write it out. They like feeling that control. And so they may literally every night, some avoidants are like this, seriously, where they will pay attention to how much money they spent and they'll write it on their little sheet right there. Or every Sunday, they plan everything out and make sure to the dot. And so they're very controlling with themselves. And so you may see them starting to do that with you, where they're going to ask you, what did you spend today? And they're going to write it on their little sheet or whatever. And you might feel like, wow, this is really controlling. This is not what I signed up for. Mention that to them. Find a way to manage your money together that they're still allowed to feel control in their own way without controlling you. And you can help them to understand a different way of how money should be perceived. But it's going to take a long time, and it's something that I will make more videos on in general, because then this video will just get too long if I tell you how to solve every single one of these. Right now, I'm just mentioning the barriers that can come up. But in general, it's very important that you have a conversation with your partner, because these types of things are very specific to each marriage. So what can you do in general, an overall sense of what can you do with if these are things that you're running into? Focus on the areas that you can accept and which are the areas that you want to see change. Then have a conversation with your partner about it. Can you accept that maybe they're a little controlling over money, but you cannot simply accept any substance use at all, any drinking at all? That's no. That one is the one focus on, right? Go ahead and try and see which ones you can manage, which ones you cannot. And Understand their perspective of their behaviors. Maybe they really don't see themselves as controlling. Hear them out as to why, and then mention your perspectives as well. Mention your worries. Be collaborative. You guys are already married, and so you should be good at collaborating. And if not, learn. Those skills are very important. I make videos on how to do that in general, but this is something I just wanted to bring up as a brief overview of some of the barriers that can come up after getting married, okay? I hope this video was helpful. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.